Welcome to the Horse Racing Ireland Racing to the Top Ownership webinar. Delighted to have three terrific guests today. Alex Frost, owner and CEO of the Tote Group, Joe Foley of Ballyhane and Clipper Logistics, and Craig Bernick, the CEO of Glen Hill Farm in Florida. Guys, the great thing I've found looking at the three of you and your history in the sport is the different backgrounds and the different ways that you've all got involved in it. Alex, if I start with you and you could just give us a little bit of an insight into how you became an owner and part of this racing industry.
My grandfather was very into it, and I think my dad promised my mum that he would keep it all away from me, but somehow I had a few good days out with him and caught the bug at an early age. I then bought a horse with some mates, it must be sadly about 20 years ago now, and I've always been very tight with Henry Candy. And one thing's led to another, and now I'm sat here looking at a stud farm, getting sort of to enjoy it all. But that's been a wonderful journey, and I've got a lot to be thankful for. One
thing leads to another is a theme I think that a lot of people in racing will have some empathy with. What about you, Craig? What was your journey into the sport and to where you've got today?
Actually, I've never met Alex, but remarkably similar. My grandparents had a farm that began in the 60s, and it totally skipped a generation. And my father never wanted me in the horse business, and here I am. So I worked in the real world after college for about 10 years, and then we had very much hobby's a bad word in the States because of taxes, but very much for pleasure horse business, and convinced the family to let me take it over and put some actual metrics behind it, and did that about 12 years ago. So I've been in the business now full time for about a dozen years.
In the business full time for about a dozen years. Joe, what about your introduction into the sport of horse racing and how you've navigated to the position you've got to?
Well, I think it was Red Rum, Brigadier Gerard, those sort of horses that excited me. My father had some horses in training with Paddy Mullins, Willie Mullins' dad, and then some of them became broodmares. So I started following the bloodstock thing through sire books and pacemaker and stuff like that. So instead of studying in college the curriculum that I was supposed to be doing, I was studying pedigree theories and dosage theories instead, and it's sort of grown from there, really.
I like the phrase that Craig used. I spent a bit of time in the real world before moving back into racing. It's something that I think a lot of people in racing will understand about the fact that there is a racing world and there's what we consider to be the real world, because the racing world sometimes is a little bit different from what we all encounter in the real world. So with that in mind, what's the experience like, in the different roles that you've all had in the sport of horse racing, and how does that relate to the real world? And Craig, I'll come to you on that first of all, given the fact that you coined the phrase in this webinar.
Sometimes I wish, I had spent the first 10 years actually taking care of horses, because that's the sort of the core competency that I don't have. But my experience in the real world was very valuable and did well there. But I think the difference is, there's so many people that own horses, and you never always understand, what their reason for getting in the business, what they're trying to get out of it, and so on and so forth. And I think those of us that have decided this is going to be our life and our career, we look for ways to improve the business or change the business, with more of a longer view, because we have investments in horses and land and in time that, it's sort of a life's work. So it's very much a long-term investment. So I think horse world, when I talk to my real world friends, half of them think it's remarkable and they wish they could do it, and half of them are probably 90% of them think it's crazy. But here we are, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And you make a life out of it, and hopefully do well and help the business too.
Alex, I think we all spend enough time dipping in between both worlds. What are your thoughts on the comparison?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a life in banking before this, sort of 20 years in a trading floor. So I guess that was a pretty mad time. But there was always that sort of zest and enthusiasm for racing with lots of people there. So in terms of kind of the world, I think the racing is versus, the real world, so to speak, is it does have its own bubble, but it's a great bubble when you see the right side of it. I mean, geez, it's given everyone huge amounts of fun, and I think we're all missing that day on a race course that I think we'll probably appreciate more than ever when it comes back to us now. I mean, it takes a lot of eating, doesn't it?
Yeah. Joe, you've been entrenched in the sport your whole life, it seems. So yeah. I guess you get such an understanding of the world of horse racing. Do you think horse racing understands the world outside of it?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm lucky enough to have never had to work in the real world. I've just watched the real world from within the bubble of the bloodstock industry and watching the 9 o'clock news, etc. So unlike Craig and Alex, I've never seen the real world. Luckily for me, I've lived in this bubble. But I think the racing world knows the outside world. We depend on the outside world, the real people, the people that make their money from in the real world to invest into the bloodstock industry. So I think most participants in the bloodstock industry pay particular attention. Will pay a lot of attention to the real world because that's where we get our participants from.
Indeed, and with that in mind, we have to understand, I'm sure you're all aware of it, the importance of providing the proper service for all the participants, all the customer bases that we need to cover, whether it be owners, racing fans, bettors. What do you think about the ownership experience? Joe, I'll start with you here. The ownership experience in particular in Ireland.
Well, it's very good. We have a tight racing program in Ireland. We've a lot of good racing with good prize money. The HRI team have been adamant to keep the prize money as strong as they can, and they put as much of their grant back into prize money as they can. I don't see that in other countries happening. I think they realise that prize money is what drives ownership. It's very vital, as well as a good ownership experience. But I think primary, it's the prize money that matters. The ownership experience is second to that. I see in other countries, I think they rate the ownership experience a little higher than prize money and don't return back enough cash back to owners. But it's the owners that pay all the bills. They pay the bills to the trainers, to the jockeys, the valets, the transport team, the vets. They in turn pay all their staff, etc. And that they need a percentage return, and the higher return that is, the more they'll invest back into the business. So the one good thing about Ireland is that we try and keep the prize money as strong as possible. They've also built good racetracks in Ireland. First of all, they've good racetracks for horses to run on, and they have built up the facilities around them, such as the Curragh Racecourse and Leopardstown recently as well. So we've high class sort of global standard racetracks for horses to run on, and indeed. Good prize money to try and win as well. The competition in Ireland is very, very strong, but that's a positive as well, because if you've got a colt or a filly that's able to compete with the strong racing teams in Ireland, you've got a world class filly or colt, and consequently their value is of a global nature, and that's very important too. Yeah,
healthy competition, but more importantly, as you say, healthy prize money, so important for the owners. Craig, in your opinion, is that satisfied by your experiences with racing in Ireland?
Well, I think it's interesting to hear Joe's point of view, because in America, we do have pretty good prize money, but we suffer from sort of a poor public perception of horse racing. It's very much a new thing that the sport hasn't struggled with in the past. And I actually was the chairman of a committee for an owners group that thought we needed to start, we needed better service for owners at the racetrack. There's, one of the great things about Ireland is I feel like their communication, their hospitality, when you run a horse and around the racetrack is outstanding. And if you compared the prize money in Ireland to America, it wouldn't compare. But I think the Joe's exactly right. The competition and the respect globally is so high that if you have a horse that can compete, I think you can make up for a lot of that prize money just in the value of the horse. If you win an Irish maiden, or if you happen to have a group horse, they're worth, far, far, far in excess of the prize money. And I think one of the things I really enjoy about racing in Ireland is the hospitality, the camaraderie of the people. It's a small country and there's lots of racetracks, but very much, I know as many people when I go racing in Ireland sometimes than I do in America. We've become very much a at home watch on television while we're getting around our day sport. And I think, the festivals that they have in Ireland, England, and France as well are I wouldn't, old fashioned is not the right word. It makes the racing very special there. So I quite enjoy it.
Yeah, tradition and prestige, I think, they go hand in hand at these major festivals, particularly in Ireland. And Alex, you get the sense, listening to what Craig's saying about the experience, overall experience. Yes, there are a number of different facets to the prize money and competition, but of course, the experience and the friendships that are part of ownership and part of the racing scene and landscape in Ireland plays a very significant part.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to quite a few of the 25 courses in Ireland, and it takes a lot of beating. I remember going with my mother-in-law to Roscommon, and in the UK, you're quite used to going. If you've got a runner, you go for the race, and then you turn around and come home. And I think we arrived an hour before the first race, and we left about 2 hours after the last race. It's a proper. I think there's an awning as you come into Roscommon Racecourse, which is, come for the racing, stay for the crack, yes. Which is it's not something you get on many racecourses around the world. It's to what, both guys say. I mean, it's a phenomenal experience having a horse in Ireland. And we just now need racing to really thrive and, to have a good funding engine to it for the next 5-10 years to go with that.
Well, you've all been fairly successful in your experiences in different parts of the industry, and of course, indeed with ownership. What do you think are the philosophies that have served you well, that you stuck by, the principles that you think have really helped you to succeed? I'll start with you, Joe, in this point. I guess you have to have certain principles and philosophies that are important to you in order to succeed.
You mean from a point of view of choosing racehorses?
In its entirety, in business, in choosing racehorses, in everything that you do.
Well, to invest into the business, from what I do in Ballyhane, you have to, you're investing into the business with a view to getting your investment back and some profit, obviously. That's from Ballyhane, from my breeding operation and from my stallion operation, etc., and my sales, consigning, etc. From a Clipper Logistics point of view, you're trying to buy racehorses for Steve and his family to enjoy, number one. He's had great success in Ireland. We've had Agnes Stewart with Eddie Lynham, for example, a very good filly. We've got Romantic Proposal at the moment, who won a handicap in the Curragh this year, and her first prize was €44,000, which is you wouldn't find it in too many other jurisdictions. But essentially, you're trying to buy a racehorse that's going to potentially add to its value to allow it to become a broodmare or a stallion or a racehorse abroad. Unfortunately, most of the racing around here is a sort of a primary racing scene, and their value really is attached to other racing jurisdictions, such as in America, Craig, or in Hong Kong or Australia or Japan. So when you find you've got a good horse, you start getting owners, you start getting offers coming in from those parts of the world, and sometimes with the prize money around here, you sort of have to unfortunately accept them. And like, we've sold our best 2-year-old this year to Hong Kong. Ordinarily, he would have ran in the Mill Reef Stakes last week or 2 weeks ago, but he was sold that week. So that was a good colt who was going to be in the Mill Reef, adding to that competition. But unfortunately, from a financial point of view, we thought we needed to sell him, which is a pity.
Craig, what about your principles and philosophies that have stood you in good stead when dealing and involving yourself in the sport?
I mean, I really believe that you can't change what you don't measure. So we try to, we don't always hold to them, but we try to put budgets together. We try to put expectations. We're really trying to develop broodmares over the long term. And I really enjoy the racing. So I really think the best chance to get a top filly is before they've had a saddle on them. In Europe, most of the very best horses are in private hands and won't be sold, especially the best female families. And then if a good 2-year-old comes up and wins a race, we might be priced out of it also. So we try to buy some yearling fillies. They have to be able to run, or they don't make it into our broodmare band. And we really feel we're fortunate enough to have some good mares already, and we feel like we're going to be producing nice enough horses that we may be forced to race if there's not a market for them. But if we're buying horses at a sale, they really have to be athletes, hopefully by a sire that has shown the ability to throw runners. And, I don't get as concerned with the pedigree close up, but I really like them to come from a deep family that's shown, if the particular animal has ability, hopefully they can fulfill their potential. In Europe, I don't know if it's fortunate, but we don't have a farm with all of the labor and maintenance and upkeep. So the horses are very much, they're widgets, if you will, from the real world. They're, the third of the horses are worth a third of the costs, excluding stud fees. So it's a lot easier to measure than it is our business in the States.
And Alex, what about your experiences and the philosophies and the principles that you feel have stood you in good stead along the way?
I'd say I'm learning by the day. I'd be very interested by what Craig and Joe say about running a stud. We've only done it for 4 years now, but I think you learn very quickly. All horses cost the same. I think you learn very quickly. You need to figure out who you can trust. Like all open markets, there's a lot of brinkmanship and salesmanship that goes on. So you've got to find people you can enjoy working with and work with well. But I do think it's, everyone's trying to get to the top end. There's no point, horses right now, more than ever, you're either in that sort of band at the top, or it's a very, very tough game. So I think it's just a question of working your way towards that. And as Craig says, not many of those top lines, the bloodlines are for sale. I'd say Joe's already got them all tied up. But I think it's a question of buying into that. It's tough. New owners coming in, you've got to try and buy into that and hope that, quite honestly, you stick with good values with people you trust, and at the very least, you're having good solid horses that can take you to racetracks, and then beyond that, you've got the dream ticket.
Well, those are all, between all three of you, good principles to build on. But just throwing our minds to the future and wondering about some of the challenges that the sport still has ahead of it, dealing with current problems that we've had in 2020, etc. Where do we all stand on what we feel might be the biggest challenge for the sport globally, in Ireland, in any particular jurisdiction, in the near future? What do you think is the one challenge you think is going to be a real test for all of us in the sport? I'll come to you, Craig, and maybe you can kick things off in this particular subject.
I would echo what Joe said a few minutes ago regarding owners, and then in the States too, the horse players, or the gamblers, if you will. They're the people that don't need a horse. Everyone that works on a farm, everybody that works in the industry, works on a racetrack, takes care of the animal in any regard. They really depend on people with a choice what to do with their money, deciding on horse racing. And it's hard for me to speak on what goes on in Ireland because I'm not as close to it, but I am very close to it here. And I think it's very much a Central Kentucky and breeder driven industry, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, they're farmers that need to sell a racehorse to somebody that wants to see how fast it can run. And probably at all times in history, that has always been a question people wanted to answer. And we really need to make sure that that globally is still the question they want to answer the next 10, 20 years. I think we've gotten a lot of funds into the business, and they've been successful. And instead of very wealthy people hiring totally qualified agents to look for the fastest horse, they've changed to where the qualified agents are looking for the best return on the investment. And at the end of the day, it's still an enjoyable sport. It's still a competitive sport. It's still a sport that, you know, we all want to have the fastest horse, and we like to look around at who owns the other fast horses, and hopefully ours is better. And if not, you say congratulations, and you hope the next time you're back you're luckier. And I just want to make sure that the business doesn't lose sight that at the end of the day, the most important thing about a horse is how fast it runs, not how it looks, not how much it sells for before it runs, but at the end of the day, it's horse racing. And I mean, I'm in the business too, and we have stallion shares, and I just said you can't change what you don't measure and put metrics behind your business, but it's very important that the industry as a whole doesn't lose sight of that.
Joe, I imagine that what Craig says has a certain amount of resonance for you in your particular sector of the industry. What are your thoughts?
Very much so. I agree completely with Craig on that. It's a sort of a big point of mine. When we're talking about promoting racing and, you know, best dressed ladies competitions, etc., etc., I think sometimes we lose focus on the actual racing. Racing is what I said half an hour ago. I got into racing through seeing Brigadier Gerard and Red Rum, etc., and getting excited by what they could do, and seeing Brigadier Gerard with all the ones beside his name before Roberto beat him in Europe. And I was fascinated by that. And I think we've got to make sure that the current 12 or 14-year-old kids still have access to race cards on their newspapers, access to TV to be able to see the likes of Brigadier Gerard or Red Rum or whoever the current horses are, like the Arc this weekend, that, you know, that kids and teenagers actually get to see the Arc in France this weekend. I think that's the main thing. It is about racing. Everything else is built around the racing and the racetrack. But I don't think we need, as Craig says, we need to keep we need to keep an eye on the fact that it's the best horses that win, and that's the excitement. It's the colour and the excitement of watching the best horses run and celebrating the actual best one. And then there's a huge business attached to that, from mares and stud farms and stallions, etc. And there's a lot of focus on that, but we really need to focus on the actual race that has sort of generated that business. The other thing is obviously the perception of racing within the community, leading to sort of the welfare area. I suppose the further away that we get from an agricultural society, or people raised in an agricultural setting and they're raised in rural settings and they don't understand animals, and when they watch racing maybe and they see horses being whipped, we in the bloodstock industry, I think and I hope, are aware that horses aren't really being hurt by that, but people without that experience from an agricultural point of view, urban people, they think the perception they get is that that's cruel. I think we really need to stand up against that. I worry when I see some jurisdictions bringing in hands and heels races just from that perception viewpoint. I think we need to stand up for our sport and our industry a little bit better. Granted that we need to make sure that obviously it isn't cruel, but we need to stand up for our sport a little bit more.
Those are some significant challenges that both Joe and Craig have raised already. Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with them entirely. I think, you know, superstar horses make it a superstar sport, and I think those are to be celebrated, and hopefully Enable can do that this weekend. I mean, my slight tangent on it all is you know, where I come at it and why I'm involved in the Tote is, you know, I do worry about racing being well funded the world over, and you know, the way we've come to the Tote in the UK, and we've got an alliance with Tote Ireland now as well, is, you know, we're looking at racing jurisdictions. You know, Craig refers to the US, but, you know, you look at Japan. You know, Japan's Tote contributes 4.8 billion a year to its industry. 4.8 billion a year. Korea contributes 1.4 billion a year. You know, Turkey is contributing almost 500 million a year from its own tote. So, you know, we contribute derisory numbers from our totes currently, but there's a model there that I think can make the whole sport better funded, and you know that takes us forward huge steps in terms of, you know, the sport's future, and the trickle down effect from, you know, good prize money, a vibrant industry. We saw it, you know, we've seen it with football, we've seen it with lots of other sports. You know, it gives the whole sport and the 120,000 people that are employed between here and Ireland in the sport, you know, a much brighter future, I hope.
Well, some really good conversation, really good information from all three of you there, and interesting challenges that we all face in the industry. So if I was to say to you, given what you're saying and the fact that there's real competition out there for the leisure money, for whether it's owners, whether it's bettors and racing fans, what would you say, Craig, is the best selling point of the sport, and what you find in your particular area is what you would feel perhaps gives you that little sprinkling of magic to say, yes, this is what I can support and this is what I believe in?
You know, I don't know anybody in the horse business that you can talk out of being in the horse business. They have the bug or they don't. And I've brought lots of friends that could afford to participate in a huge way in the horse business. I brought friends that could, you know, be syndicate owners, and the switch is either on or off. And most of the big owners from America, we hadn't heard of these people 5 years ago. It's not like they'd been coming for years and then they either get it or they don't. I really think, you know, there's nothing like being there. And I'm a bit old school. I wish we didn't have all of our best horses running on the same days in America. Breeders' Cup's been successful, and I know that other racetracks have done the same, and they're putting 6 or 7 important stakes races on the same day. But that really leaves the normal weekends a bit quieter without good horses, and that I don't think that's doing any favors. You know, the tote in Europe, I'm less familiar with, but our business here is so fragmented with racetracks and tote companies and ADW companies, streaming companies, all with their hands in the pie. We really need to get the business all working to the same end, which is sustainability for racetracks, prize money for owners, and then the better public perception. And you know, the best selling point is the horses, the fast ones, and I think that's what attracts the people. It always has. And you know, you never needed a contest for the best dressed. Everybody wore their best clothes anyway. It shouldn't be a, you know, once a meet thing. It's just such a great sport, but we really need to do a better job of marketing it to people. You know, and I'd say that's worldwide.
Yeah. Joe, what about you? Tell me what it is that makes you excited about what you do, that keeps you enthusiastic about what you do.
The adrenaline rush from having a winner is just it's incredible. I don't think there's anything to match it. You know, for a middle-aged businessman, not me, but for any middle-aged businessman that doesn't play football or baseball or cricket or basketball anymore because he or she is too old. You know, I think the only sport that they can engage in, apart from golf, that you get a real fist pumping moment in is racing. And when your horse charges past the line in front with your colours and all the drama that's led up to that moment, you know, all the drama, the purchasing and the training and the breakdowns and all the stuff. So when that horse passes that line in front to win that big race or even small race, that is fist pumping territory, and you don't get that too much when you're a middle-aged wealthy business person. And I think that's it. The sport is fantastic, as Craig said. We all think it's fantastic. It's so challenging. It never stops. Once you think you've nailed it, you really haven't. So every winner you gotta. It's an adrenaline junkie ride. When you have a winner, you want another one. I think that's the key to it, and to introduce that adrenaline rush to people who haven't had it before is it's enlightening to see when, and then that's the bug that Craig referred to earlier. When you see a guy with his first winner and he goes, right, I want to buy 5 more of these horses. We just got to keep introducing people to that and hope that they get a fair ride in the industry and get the chance to enjoy that rush.
I really enjoyed listening to what you both had to say so far about why racing retains its attraction in the face of so much competition. Alex, I'm going to guess that you're going to agree with both of them.
Oh, I don't think there's much more I can say. I mean, it really is extraordinary, you know, that moment. And you go to any one of the big festivals, and the roar of the crowd when you know your own horse goes past the post in front is just you know, there's nothing that beats that. And I think the fact that, you know, it's testament to how many people go racing each year. You know, it's the second most attended sport in the UK and likewise in Ireland. You know, so that says a lot. It's just, you know, I think the sport needs to keep its doors really wide open and keep encouraging, you know, the next generation to come through and find ways that we can sort of, you know, receive them as openly as possible. You know, we do little things at the Tote whereby, you know, things like the 10 to follow, which just trying to engage people, give them that sense of ownership, I think is so important. I think new syndicates are very, very important, just giving people a chance to really engage with the sport, not feel marginalized, but, you know, having a share of the action. And as Joe describes, you know, it takes an enormous amount of beating when you do have that moment.
Oh, I think I would also heartily agree with all of you. The buzz, the bug, once you've got the bug, it's with you for life. I learned at a very early age that is definitely the case, and it will be with me forever. Alex Frost, thank you very much. Craig Bernick, thank you. And Joe Foley, thank you all so much for your time. It's been really fascinating hearing what you've all had to say.
Thanks, Rishi.
Thank you.
Thanks guys.
Cheers, Rishi.